Good morning and welcome to our first live Google Hangout session. We're joined today by Detective Superintendent Sue Cawley and Detective Sergeant Mark Whelan from one of the Child Sexual Exploitation teams here in Lancashire. Over the last few days, we've been asking you to send in your questions that you would like answering in relation to child sexual exploitation. And we're going to be putting some of those questions to Sue and Mark this morning. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Sue and Mark to introduce themselves and their role, and then we'll get straight on with the questions.
Morning everyone, I'm Sue Cawley. I'm the Head of Public Protection for Lancashire Police. So a key part of my role is the policing of child sexual exploitation across Lancashire.
Good morning, my name's Detective Sergeant Mark Whelan. I work on the Engage team, which covers is a child sexual exploitation team that's been running for 10 years now in the east of the county, covering Blackburn and Burnley and Rosendale area.
Right, we'll get on with the questions that you've put forward then. So Rob on Facebook has asked, why has child sexual exploitation been ignored for so many years?
We could probably answer these between us. If I just, well, one thing I would say, Rob, is that albeit the media just portray that this is an area that's been ignored, there has been, certainly for the last 10 years, 12 years in Lancashire, a lot of work going on. And today is an opportunity for us to just sort of tell you about some of that work. So we do have teams across Lancashire, specialist teams who work with other agencies. They're not just the police, and I'll let Mark tell you about his team in a second, but basically the whole of Lancashire is covered by teams whose sole job it is to both to work with victims, but also to try and locate offenders and basically arrest them and put them before the court where necessary and where we can. So I'll let Mark tell you about his team and the work he does.
Yeah, I'm very proud of Lancashire Constabulary, always have been. We are one of the best constabularies, if not the best constabulary in the country. And I think that we haven't hidden from the problem of child sexual exploitation. As I mentioned in my almost job description, we've been doing this, it's now our 10th anniversary of a specialist child sexual exploitation team, which you probably couldn't say for many other places in the country, if any other places in the country. We had Operation Awaken in Blackpool, which is probably 10.5 years old maybe, and we were looking at the problem, trying to find out about the problem maybe 2 years before that 10 years, so 2003, 2004, we were looking at trying to work out what that problem was. 2005, we thought we understood it a little bit better and set up multi-agency teams, of which mine is one. So for example, my team started out we were looking why Blackburn in particular had such a high number of children going missing from home. We didn't have a clue why they were going missing from home, and we didn't know what they were doing when they were missing from home. And my initial job was to try and reduce the number of times they were reported to the police. That's what I was told to do. But what we've discovered was these children were being sexually exploited whilst they were missing from home, and that's where we sort of tried to work out what sexual exploitation was, and it was from that my multi-agency team developed.
Glyn on Facebook asks, why is it that people in the community can see things happening from inside the community early on, and by the time the police act, the problem has become massive? Glyn goes on to say that wouldn't better community links, such as using volunteers, be the answer? I guess, again, you could probably both answer that.
Yeah, I mean, again, probably stick to the same sort of format. Glyn is right that the public will often see things that they think we don't see, or indeed sometimes we don't. What we do have community volunteers. We have a lot of community volunteers across Lancashire, but it's really, Glyn is really correct when he says that the more that the public tell us about exploitation, the more that they tell us who's involved, even anonymously through organisations like Crime Stoppers. We act on information, and we do our own proactive work, which obviously we don't always advertise because it wouldn't be right to. But the role of community volunteers is certainly something that we already do, but obviously we can always improve that. So I don't know if, Mark, you want to say anything about your team?
Yeah, information is the key to policing in general, I think, isn't it? We look for information to try and find out who is being sexually exploited and who is sexually exploiting children. That is the key piece of work that we try and do. We do that in numerous different ways, but like you sort of point out, is the community has that information before we do. You do. and we ask that you send that information to us, because if you don't send that information to us, we have to find it ourselves, and we don't live in every single community of Lancashire. I personally live in the area that I police, but that doesn't mean I know every single street and what's going on those streets in Blackburn, and it's that sort of information that we're after. We also have specialist volunteers on my team, so our PACE, which is just remember
Parents
PACE,
Against Child Exploitation.
Thank you very much. Which is a charity that deals with the parents and children who have been victims of sexual exploitation. We have volunteers that work now for that charity, that work with my team, to try and make sure that children that are being taken to court as victims and as witnesses are really well looked after. And because of that, we do use volunteers, but that's not really a thing. What we're looking for is information that other people can tell us and point us in the right direction. We do it for drugs, we do it for burglars, we do it for every single area of policing that we do. And this is no different, and it's something that we're really keen to get across. If you know something, please tell us.
I think it's also worth pointing out that we do a lot of work with young people themselves as well, because obviously the young people know the methods which people can exploit them. They may have experienced it, or they may have a friend who does. And obviously on our website, there's a part of the website, Trusted to Know, which gives young people information. And we've actually, that's been designed and we've been helped with that website by young people, so from, let's say, the likes of myself to, Mark's team across Lancashire, we are talking to young people and listening to them as well. So I think it's worth pointing that out as well.
Louise on Facebook asks, will you use the services of Stunson Hunter and the likes and take all evidence seriously and in a timely manner?
Well, I think it's a really good question, and it's a question that people have asked before. And my response to that is, if people know of child abusers, and let's not kid ourselves, child sexual exploitation, some people who commit that offence sometimes try and slightly glamorise that, and I would right here now put a pay to that. So these people are child abusers. So if you're aware of people who are committing child abuse in the community where you live, the right proper thing to do is tell the police. Now, I do understand that not everybody either wants to or can feel able to speak to the police. So there are other agencies that can be spoken to, such as Children's Social Care and other the charities that we work with, Children's Society. So that's the first thing, is if you're aware of people committing offences like that, the police should be being told about it in either directly or via another agency. Obviously, people who catch paedophiles, the public applaud that, and I understand that, but there's obviously safeguards that need to be put in place when we're doing that, which can only be done, in my view, by people like the police. So that would be my response to that.
Yeah, I think Kieran Parsons is a person that uses Facebook as almost sometimes a little bit self-promotional, which I think is a danger. That the evidence that he provides, we have acted on. We have arrested people, and we have. Where he was on I think it was a Channel 4 documentary, and he was the first prosecution that he received. The good news for it was from my team. So it's not that we don't use the information. I think that there's just a very big danger about that information being first outed on Facebook, which is what he tends to do, and then we have an awful lot more that we have to spend our time on protecting the individual in question, the individual's family, the individual's property, whereas we could get the same results without having to spend all that extra time doing all that extra work just so that it can be seen on Facebook. This work happens, the police do it anyway, but we do work with Kieran, but I just wish he didn't do it in that format.
Cheryl on Facebook says, I think there is a clear need for transparency without any limitations of being PC. Our children deserve to have a voice. How will you measure that the voice is heard and acted upon immediately? No child should have to suffer any form of abuse or neglect.
Well, that's also Cheryl's point makes a good point. As I said earlier, we do listen to children. We meet them regularly, so do all my teams. Absolutely applaud what she's saying around that children shouldn't have to suffer that abuse and neglect. And I don't think in relation to being politically correct, we deal with all offenders, whether they are white British, Southeast Asian, Caribbean, whatever their ethnicity of the offender. As I said, my previous point, people committing child abuse should be brought to justice. And we listen to children, and children give us that feedback. For example, recently I met a group of young people who told me they'd been through CSE, that they were victims of CSE, and they told me some really good points that officers who worked with them had done, the way that they treated them, the way that they kept them up to date, that kind of thing. But they also gave me some feedback as well about things that weren't so good. So part of my job is to make sure that the officers who've given a less than ideal service are told about it, and I do that regularly. So again, we do listen, not just listening, but it's putting what we hear into practice, which we do try and do.
Yeah, I think that Lancashire Constabulary and the engaged team and all the police officers that work here have changed the whole way that we look at child sexual exploitation. So, for example, everyone expects the police to go looking for bad guys and for someone else, really, to look after the good guys. Well, we've changed the way that we deal with it. We go looking for vulnerable children and we listen to those vulnerable children to find out what's happening to them and who the perpetrators of offences are against them. The children are far easier to find than the perpetrators of sexual offences. So if we can find the child and listen to what they say, then we can sort of link in and find the perpetrator down the line, which is how we now look at child sexual exploitation. It uncovers what is an absolute hidden crime, or has been a hidden crime. Lancashire Constabulary has been pushing this for the last 10 plus years now, but it has been a hidden crime, and we've got quite adept, I think is a fair word, at finding that crime. My team, for example, is 98% at court, successful outcomes at Crown Court. I'm not sure of any other area of business where we could say that at Crown Court. It's an unbelievable figure, and part of that is because we listen to the voice of the child. We have Bernardo's, we have children's societies, we have children's social care, we have PACE, which is the name I couldn't remember earlier on, we have Prince's Trust, we have the Youth Service, we have Brook, which is a sexual health charity, we have Lifeline, which is a drugs charity, we have the Early Break team, we have the NHS, all working from one room, all specifically looking at sexual exploitation and specifically listening to that child to find those perpetrators. So I think your question's absolutely spot on. We should listen to the children, and we do.
Shane on Facebook says Rotherham, Rochdale, Oxford, Oldham, Derby, Blackburn, Bristol, Keighley, and so on and so on. It's no coincidence that child sexual exploitation goes on in all these towns that have large ethnic populations.
Okay, yeah, well, we touched on it earlier, didn't we? Because Cheryl talked about being PC. The issue of CSE, when the media portray CSE, we always talk about the street grooming, the gangs, and that kind of method of grooming children, which we do know that there is a propensity in that type of offence for the offenders to be sometimes from the Southeast Asian community. That said, there's a large number of other offenders. Our latest figures show that the majority of people charged and gone to court, it was 90% were white, and that is around online abuse. So we mustn't forget, we mustn't just focus just on the street grooming type of offences, because there's a lot more, a wider set of offences going on than just that. Saying that, we acknowledge that that is the case. We work with a lot of communities who also try and help us to get into those communities to talk about CSE. Let's talk about it like we are doing now. That's the reason why we're doing this. So we're not shying away from it. In large towns where there is a large proportion of ethnic minorities, there obviously will be a correlation between the demography of the town, i.e. how many ethnic minority individuals there are in the town, and some of the offences. That's not to say, and we're missing a point there if we think that this is all down to one ethnic group, because it most certainly is not. So the work that we do takes into account not just the CSE teams, we have other teams whose job it is purely and simply to deal with offenders on the internet, who groom children on the internet, who dupe children in chat rooms and the like into thinking that they are talking to a young person of their own age. And the vast majority of those offenders are white males. So acknowledging the point being made, we aren't shying away from that, but there's more to the picture than just that.
No, absolutely, I agree. There's street grooming, there's party type grooming offences, there's lone offender offences, there's group offenders offences, there's internet offenders, there's gang offenders, and which could all be classed as individual grooming type offences. CSE is somebody exercising power and overcoming somebody's trust because of that power. If we only looked at what the newspapers tell us to look at, we'd only find about 20% of the crime that we look for, or 10%. I think is the figure. And if that's the case, then we're missing 90%. I think if you only read about the gangs and only read about street grooming, then you miss all those other areas of child sexual exploitation that I've just mentioned there. And I think that would be a silly thing for us to do.
Another point that Shane also makes, he goes on to say that the fact that the police have made burglaries and car crimes a higher priority than child sexual exploitation is nothing short of scandalous.
I would agree. Absolutely, Shane, you're absolutely right. We did used to do that. We used to do that. I would say in Lancashire Police, the last 5 years, we've moved away from the targets that we all, and let's not kid ourselves, those targets came from the government asking us to meet certain targets, but we are now very much working on what's the most risk to Lancashire, the communities of Lancashire, what's the risk, what's the threat, and where's the harm coming from. And in my view, there's no greater harm that can be done than CSE. So we're focusing on that now, and we have been for several years. I would say at least 3 if not 5 years. The police, I can't speak for the whole of the police in the UK. I don't know what targets other people may still be working towards, but I can categorically assure you that in Lancashire, the burglaries and car crime targets that we were once gruelingly trying to meet, we are now focusing our energies and our efforts on something far more serious and far more damaging, as in CSE.
Yeah, I think that's not to say that you, the public, don't still want us to solve your mothers and your nanas burglaries, because you do. And if those burglaries are reported to us, then we do try extremely hard to solve those, recover property and put the offenders behind bars. But I think that like the boss says, there has been a change in emphasis in the way that we now approach crime. We have a public protection unit, of which I'm a member, and of which the boss is the head, and we look to make sure that our area of business is just as important, if not more important, than the rest of it. And I think that's probably not been the case if you went back 10 years, 15 years. Definitely not. It was all about traditional policing methods, and we're seeing some of those results in the press at the moment. I think we are a learning organisation. I think we have learnt and are learning, and I think we're fortunate from a child sexual exploitation point of view to be right at the forefront of that learning, and we're passing on a lot of the things that we've learned to all the different forces that you're hearing about in the newspapers at the moment. Touch some wood, but you haven't heard about us in the press like you have some other forces, but touch some wood.
Tracy sent in a question via email, and she's asked, there's been a significant amount of attention paid to grooming and sexual assault perpetrated by those in the media. Lessons have and are still being learned from these heinous crimes. What steps are being taken to seek out and prevent sexual assaults that take place within families?
Well, I think that's, again, another really good question, because the vast majority of offences that are committed are committed by people known to the young person, most probably a member of their own household, in fact. So we obviously take the opportunity to work with other agencies. Mark's just detailed some of the agencies that he works with. But aside from those, the actual offending in people's homes, could be your next door neighbour or somebody that lives on your street, is something that's a very real occurrence. So we need to place that emphasis on that too. The point is made around celebrities. We're talking around the Jimmy Savile and the like. yes, we are still learning from those. Again, we've gone back through our records to make sure where possible that we haven't contributed to that some of that horrendous stuff that we've been hearing in the media this week. We have a specialist team again who deal with historic offences, deal with persons, people who we call people of prominence, i.e. they're either famous, or they might be a head teacher, or they run some kind of organisation. So we are looking at that. We're not shying away from it. We're looking at it. And again, the message is to people, if the information is there, we will deal with it and we will act on it.
Yeah, I think we're almost completely changing the way that we staff up the public protection unit as well. We're creating hubs of detectives, whereby a lot of those detectives in the past will have been aimed at cash in transit thefts and large value frauds and all the other things you expect detectives to do. And the public protection unit, certainly over the last probably 3 or 4 years, has been horrendously busy. And I think Lancashire's acknowledging that we've probably got the numbers slightly wrong between the different areas of business. What's happening at the moment is Lancashire's reorganising and placing everybody into a pot, so that it's far easier to go looking for staff resources to be able to put at the right area of business. And as we've already said, we are changing what we consider to be the right area of business into more public protection work. And so we should be able to get a lot better resourcing to that a lot faster than we have been able to in the past, and that's starting to happen now, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, it's a good thing.
I think we've got time for just one more question, which came in from Rachel via email, and that was just about what are the signs that a young person is being exploited?
Okay, I mean, if I just touch on 3 or 4, and then you can give some
You
examples.
take the easy 3 or 4, and then I'll try and remember the rest.
Mark's talked about missing from home. Mark's talked about people truanting from school. We get information from colleagues, say health partners. There might be a young person going to the doctor. I'm talking about a young 12, 13-year-old with a sexually transmitted disease, or needing to terminate a pregnancy. So there's just some of the things that really people will either hear about. Young people may watch this and know about things like that at school. Yeah. And it's what happened. It's not just the fact that you're missing, as Mark said, it's what you're doing while you're missing. People often are vulnerable for a number of reasons. They might have suffered a really close family bereavement. They might feel like they've not got much attention in the family, and so you can bet your bottom dollar that a perpetrator will seek out that young person who's probably got some kind of unmet need, and they'll exploit it. And then the indicators of that are some of the things that I've said. And I don't know if, Mark, you want to give a couple of examples from your experience.
Yeah, this is what we look for. In effect, we look for children who are vulnerable to sexual exploitation. I think the question's absolutely spot on for what we should be looking for. We look for unexplained gifts as being something. So I've recently had a report of a child being given an iPhone. iPhones aren't cheap. iPhones are very expensive. So why is that 12-year-old girl being given an iPhone? Maybe it's a gift from, a young lad who's a bit of an admirer at school, and there's no real problems, or maybe it's a gift that we need to take some more thought around. We also look at whether these children have got risky peers, whether they've started going out with older friends, whether they've moved away from what used to be their associate group and are now hanging around with older people. Maybe people that we would consider as a risk to them, maybe just because of their age, but maybe also because of the lifestyle that they've chose to lead. We also look at children who have maybe started taking drugs, whether that be cannabis or even all the way up to heroin, cocaine, and all the other stuff that's available now in legal highs. If I can just say one thing about legal highs, they ought to be illegal. Really ought to be illegal. They are just as addictive, some of them, as heroin, and they are just as caustic to society, and the children that are taking them are in some real danger. And I think that we should stop calling them legal highs and start calling them something different.
We've seen a lot, haven't we, certainly across the county, legal highs contributing to young people putting themselves at risk.
Absolutely, it's the new thing that we're seeing at the moment, and it's something that we really ought to be trying to steer away from and steer our children away from as much as we possibly can. So those are some of the things that we look for, but they are. That's my main point. Is legalised. They're not legalised. They're horrible, caustic things that society should be moving away from.
Oh, well, thank you very much to Sue and for Mark for joining us this morning, and thank you for watching. As Sue mentioned, if you'd like more information about child sexual exploitations, the signs, what to do if you're worried about a friend, or if you're a parent and want some advice about how to protect your children online, you can visit our website, which is www.lancashire.police.uk, or our young person's website, www.trusted2know.co.uk. Thank you.
Thanks.